How much is that going to cut with voters at the polls that he's experienced?
Well, sometimes voters want what they don't have, and in voting for Donald Trump in 2016, quite narrowly, the United States opted to go for the first president ever who had neither elected experience nor had ever served in the military. And it would be quite a shift if 4 years later Joe Biden got nominated by the Democrats and then defeated Donald Trump and would be, again, arguably the most experienced new president ever. But the American public can be like that in some ways, in which they sometimes want what they don't have. And from that standpoint, Biden pitching himself as kind of the experienced hand might actually be a good way of going after Trump. Now, the flip side of that is that Biden has been in politics for decades. He has cast a lot of votes he will have to defend. He has held some positions that he's had to change or modify over the years. And it's possible that he will be out of step with where the Democratic Party is today, and which may be looking for a basically younger and more liberal candidate. So that's the challenge for Biden, but he does in fact start as the leading candidate. I would not say that his lead is ironclad or particularly huge, but he's leading the polls in most places.
So we on Bloomberg got to hear from another former presidential candidate, Howard Dean, earlier today, who was pretty blunt about the point you just made about, you say, out of step, maybe even demographics. This is what Howard Dean had to say.
The problem here is going to be, just to be blunt about it, age. Our party is being taken over by people who are young, by women, and by people of color. That is our core base, and of course that's going to be what America looks like. So that's Joe's challenge, is to reach that new generation that got into politics and was largely responsible for the 40 seats we picked up in 2018.
Okay, Kyle, what about it? As he said, to put it bluntly, is he too old?
I don't know if he's necessarily too old. I think that Howard Dean does make some good points about how the Democratic Party is an increasingly younger and more diverse party. But I will also say that a lot of people who are now effectively members of the Democratic Party are affluent, suburban, highly educated, white former Republicans who may have voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and then voted Democratic for the House in 2018. And frankly, Biden's announcement video, I think, was directed right at those voters, basically the people who may have been Republican in the past, but Donald Trump was just a bridge too far for them. Now, the problem for Biden, though, is that, that video was directed, I think, at this general election audience, and he's got to get through this primary first. Now, I will say that there are still a lot of voters who self-identify as moderate or even conservative in the Democratic Party. That would form his base, and also a part of that group is some of the diversity in the Democratic Party. African American voters, with whom Biden is polling pretty well. African American voters are not really leading the liberal charge in the Democratic Party. If you look at ideological self-identification, self-identified liberals are growing much more amongst white voters than African American voters. So if Biden could create sort of a fusion amongst kind of older, whiter moderates in the Democratic Party and African Americans, that's a pretty decent base in a big field.
You left one group out, women. We had a female candidate for Democrats last time. Can we really have a white male be the standard bearer for the Democratic Party this time?
I do think that is also a challenge, and it's interesting that even though I think when Democrats had the option to vote for a woman candidate in some of the many House primaries, for instance, 2018, they liked having that option, and yet here we have this field where in most polls, roughly half the vote is going to either Biden or Bernie Sanders, two older white politicians who have a lot of experience. I will also say, though, that these polls right now are not necessarily determinative. I think that a lot of people are still making up their minds, and they may eventually gravitate toward, a younger candidate or a woman or a person of color or both.